Well, hi, everybody. It's Kim Winter from Logistics Executive Group. Thanks for giving up some of your time to listen or join us audibly and visually today. It's my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, hailing from Singapore, Kah Soon Au. Hey, Kah Soon, how are you doing?
Good, Kim. Thanks for having me.
Good job. And Kah Soon, you are our current Executive Director, Associate Director in Asia and Oceania for Logistics Executive Group. You've had 30-odd years experience in senior roles throughout Asia, and want to talk a little bit about those roles today, of course. You've been the co-founder of a tech startup as well in the area of logistics and supply chain. Prior to that, you were the Global Head of Marketing and Corporate Communications for APL Logistics, and you've held several other roles right across the region, including fairly heavy bunch of education timing in Australia as well. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself right from the early days, Kah Soon.
Oh, thank you very much, Kim. Well, I'll probably start with, how I got into this industry. You're right. I spent a lot of time here, obviously in Asia, but also I spent a significant amount of time in Australia, both for my education and for working there. My story really is about starting in Asia in the 90s. It was a really exciting time for us because there's a pretty go time for all the trade and financial services that's actually happening in industry. So that's where I kind of started working in financial services and in marketing. With pretty big companies around in the region. Now I took a break a little bit after that. To go back to school to Australia, and when I came out again, I restarted in Singapore, in consulting as well as in transport and logistics. So interesting times have been, for us right now in the region as well. There's a lot of activity and a lot of work going on around transport and logistics.
Good stuff. Hey, well, why don't you just give the audience a bit of a snapshot on the big picture and what's going on in Southeast Asia or broader Asian market. You've been there for many years and are our local guy on the ground there. Of course, Asia has always been the dragon economies by comparison to the rest of the world, seem to have weathered storms better than other parts of the world. It's very active. You've got so many countries there, all pushing for trade with global markets. Give us a bit of a snapshot overhead and any stats and information that might be useful to our audience.
Certainly, Kim. What's been happening here in this part of the world has been really a real roller coaster as well. I think, obviously 2020 is a year that we'd rather see the end of, and we're glad that's over. But, going into 2021, what we have been seeing here on the ground is that, economic forecasts for the major economies here in ASEAN have been forecasted to grow from, anywhere between 5 to 8% in 2021. Now, a lot of that really has to be put in context because, a year ago, back in April, the PMI, or the the manufacturing index was, slumped to about 20 or 30. But, in January this year, it's picked up to above 50 for most of the economies around the region. So, it's a good sign for us to actually see that happening and happening in a rapid way. Now, part of that obviously is, the rapid action that a lot of governments around the region have taken in terms of locking down, right, the COVID infections, but also there's a policy action to actually inject liquidity into the economies over here so that, businesses can continue to operate and, retail trade and growing demand for e-commerce has actually been a big driver of that.
Mm-hmm. Great. So, and in regards to the trends in the market there at the moment, Where are you seeing? I mean, you're engaged in a range of corporate advisory projects there at the moment. What are you seeing in regards to transformation? Is 2021 a transformation year, or is it steady as she goes in regards to strategy for a lot of the biggest supply chain companies this year? Give us a bit of a feel for what you're seeing happening on the ground.
So what's happening, Kim, is that if we take a step back, right, the macros around the region are still looking pretty good. There's a relatively young population base. There's high technology and mobile adoption. And, there's also continues to be a trend of urbanization and consumption. So those are really good macro trends for us to rely on. But what's been happening as well is that in terms of trade and trade as a region, one of the significant events we've seen and had clients continue to talk to us about is that in November of 2020, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, was signed by 10 of the ASEAN countries, including China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, this is a significant and pretty landmark agreement that's been signed because, it's going to comprise about 29% of global GDP and 30% of the global population just within this particular agreement. And what's also significant as a milestone for this is that China has had experience and history of a lot of bilateral trade agreements. And this is the first time they've actually signed a regional and multilateral trade pact with a lot of countries. Now, what does this kind of mean for us? There's a lot of talk, and we've had, inquiries around what this means for clients and companies. But one of the significant areas that this will help is that it actually helps to streamline a lot of the trade facilitation and a lot of measures that are in place around the RCEP area. One of the areas that are going to face significant change is that there's a ruling there for a common ROO, right? Rules of origin for goods that are originating or being processed in the industry. Now, this has always been a bit of a thorn in the side for a lot of companies because when you cross borders, you have to conform to a different set of rules, different set of regulations according to the country. So the RCEP, if it's ratified later this year, is going to see adoption of a common ROO. And that holds a lot of potential, especially for companies and MNCs who want to locate their operations in a really efficient, optimal way in the region. So it becomes a bit of a game changer, Kim, when we kind of look at the implications of trade agreement on RCEP. So that's just one facet of it.
Okay, and you've been working a fair bit on merger and acquisition deals in the last probably 12 months or so that I'm aware of, and probably well and truly before that. There's a lot of consolidation. I mean, we see on the wires daily about some of the big deals going on globally, but as is the case normally, Asia is right in the thick of it. Talk to us a little bit about what sort of M&A activity is taking place. What are the trends? What are some of the deals that have been going down? And what does that mean for the marketplace, and especially for upstream and downstream supply chain?
Okay. You're right. There's been a lot of activity and a lot of attention given to the logistics space. I think in the span of the last 12 to 24 months, what we've kind of seen is there's been a wave of consolidation with pretty large organizations involved. Now, some of our viewers will probably be aware of, the tie-ups between Carry Logistics and SF, for instance, as well as the current situation of the sale of Toll Global Express. So part of this is some of the areas that we are seeing on the ground in terms of consolidation in industry. Beyond that, and if we scratch a little deeper, we also see consolidation in the cold chain across the industry, especially in areas where countries which are large food producers or large food importers have a need for this. Besides that, we're also getting into more and more of the area and discussions with our clients about what this kind of means, because besides all of these large acquisitions, we're also seeing activity and discussion around what could be tier 2 or tier 3 type of consolidations. And, that's where I think, there's also a question mark around what this means for supply chains, because when you bring these companies together, it's also an issue of combining different resources, talents, as well as the entire supply chain. So it's an area where, we're getting a lot of attention and a lot of inquiries about.
Sure. Well, and it certainly seems that demand on the talent acquisition side is continuing to be very strong throughout the Asia-Pac region, in particular Southeast Asia. So I can only assume that as companies transform, they're looking for new sort of more talent coming into organisations. What sort of talent are you seeing as in the demand cycle? Is it technology based? Is e-commerce, is last mile transformation where the talent is going, or there are different areas where the demands for talent are occurring?
There's a fair amount of demand that's going on for those areas that you talk about, Kit. There's a concern, I think, underlying concern that what the COVID situation or the pandemic has really accelerated is this need for more digitalization across the entire supply chain. So with that, you need a skill set that can actually evolve these companies, and those kind of skills are actually in high demand right now. And so that's one of the areas where we're seeing clients talking to us about how they can insert this type of talents into their organization. There's also a survey and report out by the Temasek and Google, for instance, that kind of shows these trends are here to stay. About 1 in 3 of the respondents to their report actually are showing that they're first timers to using digital services, and the number of internet users across in ASEAN have increased from about 260 million 5 years ago to about 400 million today. So that's a significant jump. And so what this kind of underlines is that there are implications for both talent for addressing the technology issues, but there's also a need for talents which can actually handle that change management in specific processes, in specific organizations, and across specific geographies. So I talked a little bit about RCEP. So as you kind of know, the region is not just one homogeneous country, right? There are different rules, and there are different areas where countries continue to have very localized conditions, and that also needs, the kind of fit for market talent that clients are talking to us about.
Okay, well, thanks for sharing that and giving us a bit of insight there, Kah Soon. Now you're in Singapore. Talk to me a little bit about some of the regulation. I know it's a very heavily regulated market, very successful country. Historically, Singapore has been an absolute market leader in a whole range of criteria right across economic strength. And I see they've done a pretty good job as well over there in regards to management of the pandemic. By and large, regulations around trade. Now, I know you and I spoke some time ago about the KCR regime. Maybe you can share with our audience what KCR is and what the significance for trade and business is.
I'd be happy to, Kim. The KCR regime, or the non-consignor regime, is going to be implemented in Singapore in the first half of this year. It's a security measure to enhance air cargo on commercial aircraft, and it's also a requirement by the ICAO. So part of this security measure, what makes it different is that, in the past, we've had several other security certifications like, CTPAT and TAPA, and they've been voluntary in their adoption. But what the KCR is going to be is that it's going to be a security certification that a lot more stringent security compliance and implementation. The implication of this is that by participating in the KCR, consigners who register under it will be maintained on a list of under the known consignor list, and when they ship through Singapore, it affects all cargo that will actually be shipped through Singapore, whether it's in transit or actually coming through. So one of the areas which will have implications for clients is that for those that are on this list, they'll only be subject to random screening of their known cargo, because they will have shown that they've adopted acceptable levels of security in their logistic operations. Now, this security will also need to be independently validated by an external assessor. Now, on the other hand, if consigners don't want to register as under this list, they can continue with the current operations, but their entire consignment of their cargo will then be subject to a full security screening. So, these are implications which are going to carry pretty complicated, sometimes complicated, or will increase the amount of compliance that clients are going to have to look at. Now, this also will start to streamline in what we talked about a little earlier in terms of trade facilitation across the region being harmonized, right? And having a single ROO under RCEP framework, for instance. So regulators are, I think, from what I've been seeing and talks with regulators, is that they're also playing a bit of accelerated game. To also catch up to the reality of how business is being done today, and it's being done faster, it's being done more with technology, and it's also being done with the aim to actually increase the pie for everybody involved, especially when it comes to trade across the region.
Awesome. Well, that's really interesting. And I note when you were talking about the different areas of influence in regards to demand for talent, you are mentioning heavy reliance on tech and the way that affects trade. You've always had a fairly close finger on the pulse in regards to investment in the region historically, not only from helping to take companies public from some of your corporate positions, but also around on the M&A and working with venture capital and private equity players. Talk to us a little bit about what the trends are around investment at the moment, what direction things are going in, and where the investment is coming from.
Well, it's a trend where we're seeing that the emphasis of investment in technology still remains really high. But what we're seeing is that early stage investing continues to be pretty strong. That means that at the stage of your seed or your Series A, but midterm financing or investments have started to plateau. Now, part of that is really about appetite in the market for companies that are looking for different types of corporate exercises, whether it's an acquisition or whether it's investment into new businesses. What we're also seeing here in this space is that with that trend, a lot of the companies which are trying to transform or are new to the scene, especially in technology, they're now starting to try to chart and place more emphasis on a path to profitability and a fit for market strategy. So in the past, before we had COVID, what we could kind of see is that there was a bucket load of ideas, and there's a lot of excitement around super platforms around the region. So now what we kind of see is that there's also a pivot around that, where the conditions today is that consumer habits are kind of changing. 1 in 3 of those consumers, like we talked about, are new consumers using digital services. There's been a pivot away from, things like travel and hospitality to groceries, to digital financial services and health tech, for instance, because, you can't go to the bank to get a loan, so you'll do it over your phone or through virtual loan applications. but also in education, because you won't have classrooms full of students, for instance, and that has to be delivered in a way that makes sense in this kind of new normal, right? So that's what we're kind of seeing in terms of the space in the space right now. And we already talked about a little bit about what is happening on a bigger scale. It is consolidation in terms of looking at broadening those networks and platforms across the region. And that implication really is about taking out the friction from the supply chain that we've seen. So it's exciting times. And I think that looking ahead, especially with how the regional economies are shaping up, and there's also a bigger momentum for vaccinations to take place, is that this is going to put us in a good space in 12 months to 18 months down the track.
Great. Well, thanks for giving us that update. I mean, Asian economies are notorious for their efficiency, for their ability to get on the front foot, to move quickly, and to take advantage of any opportunities that exist on a macro level. Of course, so many emerging economies still in the region, although many of the economies in the Asia market, you'd have to argue, wouldn't really so much be seen as emerging these days. They're fully mature. And we talk to Singapore as one of the great hubs traditionally of global trade, and it only grows in that stature. We've had an office there since, I think, 2005, 2006. But any time I've been stationed there, I've spent 90% of my time outside of Singapore. And I think that's pretty much true from a talent perspective and a leadership perspective for a lot of the companies that are based there. Their executives tend to spend, or have tended to spend, most of their time traveling. What's the last 12 months meant to that whole process of the travelling executive from a regional office in Singapore? It's been almost impossible to travel to many countries. So what impact has that made?
Well, as they say, the show must go on, Ken. And that's what's happened. Face-to-face things have obviously been overtaken by digital and virtual meetings. Phone conversations, and it's never been a better time for us to actually have this kind of technology and platforms available. Like even today, right, we're doing a virtual face-to-face interview, and you can do that with technology just off the shelf. But even more important than that, I think, is that it's sharpened a lot of executives and the workforce in terms of the importance of working from home. And working from home also means that you need to have a platform and infrastructure behind that. It's also a different style of management, Kim, because obviously, you lose the kind of social interaction you'd normally have if you were in a group or put together, obviously, on the same floor. So you need to compensate or adapt to that in a different way. So I think the dynamics of what's happened is really interesting, because executives have had to grapple with that, and obviously they're coming to us, asking for how they can adapt to this, and whether it's coaching or whether it's talent management. It's been a very interesting time for us to look through a different lens and kind of help them through this process.
Yeah, awesome. Well, look, really, really intrigued by your views and your updates, and I'm hoping our audience is getting some value to finding out just what's going on the ground and in a real significant hub like Singapore and the broader regional perspective that you're providing. Hey, I know you've got a couple of meetings to go to today, so I won't keep you long, but with all of our guests, we always like to wrap by getting your views on a couple of issues, quick fire questions. You've got a very deep and rich, long leadership history with the companies that you've been involved in. The quick one I want you to answer is for other leaders, whether it's in supply chain or other businesses. Really interested to hear from you what your advice would be for leaders over the next 12 months. What are the one or two things that you would advise leaders to be focused on to be successful in their business activities over the next 12 months or so?
Well, Kim, over the next 12 months, I think that we'll continue to see bumps on the road. It's not only because we're coming out from COVID, but also because of the new normal of how we are running our businesses, and how perhaps the attention is also to pivot on e-commerce. So my advice really is to be continue to be adaptable, continue to be flexible in what you're doing, especially in this time. There's a lot of opportunity that continues to be there, because despite the slump we've seen due to the pandemic, the pickup in activity has not slowed down. So, while business continues to grow, you need to be in a position to seize that opportunity. And that means that, we need to continue to be open to ideas and how we can continue to thrive. So I think that's important, and keeping, of course, our eye on the bottom line, especially, with the liquidity in the market, will be important, because, capital raising in these kind of conditions may be a little harder, but it's still possible. So continuing to keep an eye on the business as it grows, but also being flexible to the new conditions that we are facing, I think will be key over the next 12 months.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Well, and the final question is, given the fact that logistics and supply chain profile has never been as high as what it is, with the change in consumer behaviour, with last mile, with e-commerce, with online acquisitions, all of the above. We're seeing a lot of younger talent being attracted towards supply chain, which is absolutely fantastic. And we're seeing that globally across all of our 13 offices. So from your perspective, for young talent, whether it's in Singapore or in other countries in your realm in Asia, what would be your one recommendation to young talent applying for roles, going into an interview with logistics supply chain company, or a company that may be more broadly a retail or wholesale company, or a tech company, e-commerce company? What would be the one thing that you would say to young talent going into an interview? What would be the one thing that they should push in that interview?
I think that besides what I already talked about, flexibility, I think that young talent really brings a breath of fresh air in terms of creativity. And that's incredibly important, because we are in a stage where creativity and innovation is going to be what differentiates you from the next guy. And I think young talent have a great opportunity to present that and put their ideas forward. And in an environment which I think embraces that, because I think for a long time our logistics and supply chain industry has had its own challenges in moving forward. And I think that, what this brings to the table today is that, it's being looked at strategically, it's being looked at as a valuable component in the whole value chain. So we can see that at a regional and at regulator and even at the government level, there's a lot of attention being given to trade, and logistics is really the lifeblood of that. So I would encourage all the young talents out there to be creative in a field that's facing a lot of these challenges, and with those challenges come the opportunities for them to shine.
Right. Well, thanks, Kah Soon. I mean, very challenging environment, and a lot of people are doing it very tough. Unless we forget those people and give our encouragement to all businesses and individuals that are doing it tough out there at the moment. Having said that, a lot of opportunity as well. So Kah Soon Au, our Associate Director for Asia and Oceania for Logistics Executive, thank you so much for giving your time today. Really good to see you again.
Thank you, Kim. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Kah Soon. And to our audience, thank you for giving some of your time or your ear to our conversation. We hope that we've shared some insights and shed some light on some of the issues that are salient in Asia at the moment. As usual, to all of the first responders, the health and wellness specialists out there keeping us safe, thank you. We take our hat off to you always. To everybody out there, stay safe, keep distance, wear your mask, wash your hands, and look after each other. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kah Soon.
Thank you.